Now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Hello and welcome to Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Dressing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen.
That's right. And each new gardening year brings new trends in the world of gardening. And tonight we're joined by Katie Tamony of Monrovia to discuss Monrovia's design trends and new plants for 2023. What garden trends have you heard of or are excited about this year? Do you have questions for Katie about Monrovia's design trends? You can write us here at downthegardenpathpodcast@hotmail.com. And don't forget to stick around for the end of the show for our new Stepping Stone segment, where we'll answer more listener questions and give you timely tips for your garden and landscape.
So just before Katie joins us on the show, a little bit about her. Katie's official title is Chief Marketing Officer, but she really is Monrovia's Chief Storyteller and Trendspotter. Katie has more than 25 years of expertise in lifestyle and leisure industries. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Great to be here.
Thank you. We're so excited that you were able to join us. So, Monrovia. Who is Monrovia? Can you tell us a little bit about Monrovia?
Sure. Well, Monrovia Nursery Company is almost 100 years old. We are the largest grower of ornamental landscaping plants in the United States. We grow shrubs, perennials, trees, edible plants, house plants. You can completely, landscape your garden with what we grow.
Amazing. So tonight we're going to talk about, timeless design trends and some amazing new plants for 2023. But how do you and Monrovia come up with research your design trends every year?
Well, it's a blend of tools that we use, actually. And I think a little bit is based on my background. I was a magazine editor for many years. I worked on a West Coast lifestyle magazine for about 20 years. And so we would do a lot of forecasting, thinking about what gardeners were interested in by looking at, what landscape designers were doing, what people were purchasing, what trends from other industries, what's going on in the food world, because that influences what we want to grow, or where people are traveling, and what's going on in people's homes, because that has an influence on what we want to grow as well. So we look at all of those influences. We also do a lot of consumer research, some through surveys, but some of it looking at our own social media and what email subscribers are responding to. We have a large community out there of Monrovia gardeners who tell us what they are interested in, whether that's specific plant colors that they're drawn to, or a style of gardening that they're interested in. So it's a blend, really, of different tools that we use.
Very cool. Very nice.
Interesting.
Going into kind of what your Monrovia gardeners are telling you, a lot of the trends that we're seeing is a big, strong revival of native plants and pollinators. So are you finding that as well? With your plant influences?
Definitely. We're seeing a strong influence, a strong trend in pollinator plants. I think people are feeling more than ever that they want to do the right thing and nurture bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, and they really want help attracting those beneficials into their gardens and supporting the bees and doing whatever they can, to help our bee population. And I think there's also an interest in climate adaptive plants, you know, thinking not just about natives, although certainly we're seeing an interest in that, but also just understanding, you know, right plant, right place. You know, I really want to make sure that I choose a plant that's going to survive where I live. And I think increasingly people are aware of extreme weather and how, you know, how do I see my garden, you know, through, you know, changing weather patterns too. So, and then from a style standpoint, I think we're seeing our consumers really drawn to meadow style gardens, sort of a wilder look in the landscape. Yeah, there's a trend that we've been watching for a while that we call the Garden of Abundance. And this is a trend that actually blends that interest in pollinators, you know, I was talking about, also a desire to grow our own food, to have more, you know, variety of edibles growing in the landscape, and also not confining your edibles to a raised bed area, but really, you know, how could I use my edible plants throughout my landscape? And you know, whether that's, you know, having a beautiful blueberry bush, you know, we grow a blueberry that a beautiful ornamental shrub, basically, that also produces fruit, you know, that looks fantastic in the fall, gets wonderful fall color, but then also provides that bounty of delicious fruit. So I think that the Garden of Abundance trend is kind of like this Garden of Eden idea.
Yeah, that's
So
a great
very cool.
idea.
Yeah, and I think it's very it's kind of freeing for people to think about, you know, having their edibles in the landscape again and not just confining them to a you know, limited area. You know, you think about fig trees and citrus and all kinds of fruit trees that provide ornamental interest too. So
yeah, I think it helps gardeners know, because they where the sun is, like where the best place for a raised garden is, doesn't necessarily mean that's where their sun is, right? So I think the ability to plant according to your light, because most vegetables, there are a few exceptions, but most need full sun. So, you know, I think people used to, like, they never would have put, you know, vegetables in the front yard, but if that's where your sun is, then, you know, then you can mix in. So I think it's great that people are I think the desire to grow food has overtaken the caring what your neighbors think. You know what I mean?
well, and also that you can sneak in some things that your neighbors might not notice.
Yeah.
If you kind of, you know, blend your front yard in different ways. And I think the other great thing about some of these, what we call edible perennials, is that, you know, when you're growing vegetables, they're kind of like annuals. You know, you're thinking about them, you know, right for the summer. I just put in my tomatoes.
Yeah.
But with blueberries or strawberries or figs, you get this longer season with them, so they're looking good longer garden as well. So there's just and not just edible fruits, but I'm thinking about herbs, you know, how those play a part too in the landscape. Rosemary. We have a Tuscan blue rosemary that's just a fantastic.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's a fantastic hedging plant too, you know, besides producing this wonderful herb that you can use for cooking. So
yes. Oh, that's neat. I did take in my off season, I did take a course designing with vegetables in the perennial bed. And one of the ideas, and I'm really hoping to be able to use it, was because, you know, along the garden edge can be tricky, right? Because, you know, the walkway people step, or using parsley. Which is also a great pollinator plant, and it stays green, it grows well, it's pretty drought tolerant. You know, usually people have more parsley than they know what to do with, but instead of just thinking about it as an herb, but actually growing it as an edge around your garden. You know, I know it doesn't flower necessarily, but, you know, it's a nice bright green and a nice compact size. So it's like, oh, you know, the foliage is very pretty. And I was like, I was like,
what a great, unexpected idea. I love it.
Me too. So I'm hoping to find clients that are, and I have a few spots that I may even try it on. So in my own garden. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, so to think, well, we can't really grow rosemary here very successfully as much, but for our other listeners who could grow it, you mean, then that would make a great edging plant as well.
Oh, sure. And, in that idea of the garden of abundance, just getting back to pollinators for a moment,
Mhm.
I think the other element of this that we're seeing a lot of is interest in plants that have kind of a health benefit or health quality. That's lavender.
Mhm.
Certainly fits into that just kind of aromatherapy idea, but also echinacea, which a lot of people recognize as being, having great health benefits. We've seen a real increase, a rise in interest in growing echinacea, and we've got some new compact varieties, so it doesn't get kind of all rangy.
Oh, nice.
Back to your parsley comment,
Yes.
echinacea that can be at the front of the bed or border, and echinacea growing in many, many different colors. I think there's so many options out there now
Mhm.
for gardeners, and with that wonderful bloom, sort of big round happy face that the bees can land on, easily.
Mhm.
That just makes a nice addition to any garden, and
Yeah.
is quite zone friendly.
Yes.
um yeah, so I think there's just so many options out there. If you want to have this Garden of Eden idea, it's really kind of unlimited. You don't have to have a big garden either to have
Right.
that look.
Right. All right.
Very true. Just before we jump into some of our design trends, which I'm sure everybody is excited to hear more about and the wonderful plants within them, we do have two listener questions that kind of tie back into what we were talking about before. Beth has written in, hello, Joanne and Matthew, wondering where Monrovia is located. Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. We actually have 4 nurseries, and they're located in California, in the kind of middle of the state, in Oregon, in Connecticut, and in Georgia in the southeast. So we like to kind of describe it as we're in the 4 corners of the United States.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this allows us to grow and trial and test plants in all, regions of the U.S., which is really helpful for us determining
Yeah.
if the plant is going to be successful, to really sort of put it through the proving grounds
Mhm.
in these 4 places. If a plant can thrive in those 4 places, then we know we've got a real good one on our hands.
Mhm. And
Most
for the most
definitely.
part, you supply the plants to the growers, right? Like you do the testing and the promoting,
Well,
and
no,
then you.
actually, we do most of our growing.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so when I talk about our locations, these are large nurseries,
Okay. Mhm.
1,000 acres, 600 acres, different places. So we supply to independent garden centers, and to Lowe's. That's the one sort of mass
Oh, okay.
home center that we supply in the U.S.
Very
Okay.
cool. And do you supply any Lowe's in Canada?
Oh yeah, I think we do. Yes, I think we do.
Okay. Just thinking for our Canadian listeners.
I know.
Um,
I know.
Chris has also written in, does Monrovia sell plants and other products online?
We do. We kind of have a different kind of way at this, though, that right now you can order a plant online and then get it shipped to a garden center close to you. So
Oh,
that way shipping is free, and we ship that plant that you ordered along with that garden center's regular order. So it arrives kind of in peak, condition. You just go on our website, order your plant, and it actually arrives with your name on it, a little tag
wow.
that says, Joanne, Matthew, this is your hydrangea. And then the garden center calls you and you go and pick it up. But that way it's like it's really well cared for, it looks
Mhm.
great. It hasn't been, shipped in a box,
Sitting in the back of a UPS truck,
Right.
right?
No, maybe it's been refrigerated in a truck. So it looks really good when it arrives.
Yes.
And all you have to do.
Oh, that's a great way to do it. Wow.
That
Well,
is a
Chris,
great.
you're going to have to try and order something just to see how that works for our listener, one of our repeat listeners and writers. He writes in. So that's great.
So, Katie, what is on the design trends and must-haves for 2023?
Well, let's talk about what's old is new again. That's kind of
Ooh.
how I think of it. We are seeing a real interest in kind of timeless classic designs that I think with some of the new breeding and new plant choices out there, You can, make them feel fresh, but they kind of have the principles and structure of some classic design ideas that have been around with us, in some cases for centuries. So I wanted to talk with you guys about what you're seeing as well. But one of the interests that we've been seeing rising, that's almost a counter to what I was talking about the wilding and the Garden of Eden idea, is this draw that we have to the garden design principles of, like, the Greeks and Romans who first brought us topiary. I was kind of surprised to learn that topiaris was the original name for somebody who was a gardener. They were called topiaris, right? Because the gardens of ancient Rome, they tended to be these fancy places where they're really well off, right? And the rise of topiaries and shaping plants in interesting forms, that was the responsibility of the topiarist, the gardener. And I think some of the other classic things that we are attracted to from that era are symmetry, and thinking about how you arrive into a space, arrive into the garden, thinking about what that entry looks like. Kitchen gardens, keeping your herbs and fruits kind of right out the kitchen door. That was definitely something we got from the ancient Romans and Greeks. Water features, having sort of a central water element, drawing you a focal point into the center of the garden. So some of those ideas about symmetry and balance we're definitely still attracted to today. And the way that that's translating today is something that we call architectural simplicity. So this trend is about using a lot of evergreen plants in your garden and then just complementing those evergreens with a little bit of color, typically white blooming, blue blooming, flowering plants.
Okay.
Keeping it really simple, very serene, using boxwood, for instance. That's a very popular part of the architectural simplicity look. And Monrovia grows a lot of different, varieties of boxwood. One in particular that I think is perfect for this look is winter gem boxwood.
Okay.
Which it's among the hardiest of the small-leaved boxwoods. And it can help you create a nice formal look in the garden. If you use it in its globe form, we do a topiary style that's kind of big round ball. And a few of these in a row give your garden this kind of formal, lovely anchor, I guess is what I would call it. And complementing that might be something like the mint julep juniper, which is very hardy. And it can also work as a topiary, but it's really beautiful, kind of even in its just natural arching form, really nice in borders, or it's kind of, the edge of an area. And then, complementing that with some blue or white flowering shrubs, such as a hydrangea, or even, roses, gives you a look that kind of is reminiscent of maybe an Italian, style villa, an English garden. As people have traveled extensively in Europe, they've come back and they want to kind of, have that look in their backyard. So the architectural simplicity look, you see this a lot at hotels, when you check in, you walk into that front entrance of that hotel and they've got the two stately topiaries on either side of the door. And you think, oh, I'd like to have that, at my house. This is that look. And it's actually, fairly easy to maintain because the heart of this garden design is evergreen. It's just, you're just sort of being really choosy about your flowering shrubs and keeping your palette limited to white and blue, kind of keeps it easy to take care of and kind of serene.
Very serene, wouldn't it? Yeah. And you do find that I have had customers that wanted like a green and white garden, that just liked the idea of that simplicity.
Yeah. And so I think that's harkening back, for me, it harkens back to the sort of timeless symmetry of these earlier gardens and why those are still appealing. It works, that we're responding to something, when we see that simplicity and that symmetry.
Yeah.
So that's, a trend that is definitely opposite to the
Yes,
garden abundance idea.
that's right.
And both are so appealing and attractive.
Right. Yeah.
But I think another way that we're seeing what's old is new again is maybe stealing a little bit from the Victorians. When the Victorians started, developing lawns and hedges and perennial borders and that's kind of when in the Victorian area that's when breeding really started improving plants, and people started thinking about, well, how can I get a variety to do this or that? But what's really new here is kind of a return to nostalgic plants, like lilacs, and people are falling in love with roses again, and they're interested in hydrangeas and rhododendrons and even old-fashioned flowers like hollyhocks and those sort of classic, maybe your grandmother grew them. And you have these great memories or great associations with that plant because maybe it was something your grandmother grew. And I think that's another trend that we really see taking off, is this interest in that kind of nostalgic, because I think people want their gardens to obviously make them feel good, but help them relax, and really have a meaning in their life, like just looking good, but if they can plant something that reminds them of something that
I think of peonies, right?
Peonies, another one. Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, that is a common one where peonies lasted generations. Like there's so many of my clients who have their grandmother's peony, or a piece of their grandmother's peony. And so definitely that's something that holds a lot of memory, right, Matt?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even this year in my first year college students, I'm finding that trend very prevalent as well. A lot of, again, like nostalgic, oh, my grandmother had it, or, oh, I haven't seen these before. Where were they from? Or I've heard about these in older gardens, or I've seen older gardens with these. So definitely, and even some of my clients, are returning to roses. And again, that huge nostalgia factor, but all of those like grandmother plants returning to the foreground of.
I mean, for a while it seemed like people really weren't interested, for instance, in roses. That was and frankly I could see why, because a lot of fragrance had gotten bred out of roses. I don't know, like 10 years ago it was hard to find a new rose that really smelled amazing, like something that my grandmother had. But now I think breeders have introduced some, more fragrant varieties. We happen to have one Eau du Parfum, the series is called. Yeah, I know. That sounds so fresh, so amazing smelling. And it really is. It's a beautiful, like tightly budded, kind of cabbagey looking bloom, and it's got this intense fragrance. Comes in 4 luscious colors. But roses in general, I think, are they've figured out how to keep the disease resistance, that breeders were looking for, but bring back the fragrance. And so there's a lot of beautiful, wonderful choices of roses out there. Not just ones that Monrovia grows, certainly, but I think it's a fantastic time to be a rose lover. For
sure. That's good.
Wonderful. Good. So is there anything else about the new Victorian trend?
I would say the other great thing besides the breeding going on in roses is that another old-fashioned plant that's really getting a lot of interest from breeders, and there's so many choices out there, is the hydrangea, the hydrangea macrophylla or the hydrangea paniculata. Lots of wonderful choices there that make that plant fit gardens today, not the big Victorian estate, but we have a line of hydrangea called Seaside Serenade, and it comes in like 9 different varieties in that collection, but they all stay nice and compact, like 4 feet tall. They don't get like 6 to 8 feet, big leggy hydrangeas. Beautiful blooms, really thick stems and thick leaves, because it was originally bred, the series was the style was bred for the cut flower market, you know.
Oh,
okay.
So that's why the stronger stems, the stronger leaves. And so these hydrangeas they won't sort of wilt in a storm, you know, they'll stand up
Okay.
to weather. Like
Are they macrophilias?
Yes, they're macrophilias.
Okay.
They're rebloomers. We have a beautiful one called Newport hydrangea, which in acidic soil just really retains this lovely, intense blue shade. But then we have another one of my favorites for 2023. This is such a real modern twist on an old-fashioned favorite. It's called Glacier Bay. And what's modern about it is it has these really dark black stems and white blooms. Yeah, it doesn't even, at first doesn't even look like a hydrangea. It has these sort of star-like little caps in the bloom. It's just a stunning shrub. I mean, it's really eye-catching. That's my favorite hydrangea.
I'm looking at the Seaside Serenade series, and you are right. Like it's jet black, beautiful stems, hardy to like zone 4.
Yes,
so it would be like zone 3 in Canada. Wow, that's stunning. Yeah, very like lace cap, nice double spots.
Right?
Very pretty.
Really nice.
And
I wonder what he was looking at, right, Katie? Like he's like his expression. I'm like, so yeah, so you got the Google, yeah.
And Fireside Island or Fire Island.
Fire Island. I love that one too. It's got those little edges of intense kind of magenta. Yeah, that's a beauty. And that we've had that for a couple of years. And that's one of my favorites too. And I love that they just stay, you know, you plant it, you want it to get a little bit big, but you don't want it to take over.
Right.
These are what I would think of as tidier hydrangeas.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they look good in containers too, right, Katie? Like those, I mean, you do need to put them in our climate here, and you need to put them in the ground to get them through winter, but you can definitely really, instead of spending all that money on annuals, that you're just going to, you know,
they make fantastic container plants, actually, especially that Fire Island. It's a real cutie.
Yeah.
Might have to do some Monrovia ordering after. Just gonna
try it out. So hydrangeas, roses, rhododendrons, even azaleas, I think are kind of, you know, making a little bit of a comeback, you know, which is another plant that I thought, you know, it's kind of, everyone's seen it, it's boring, but no, beautiful colors and
rhodos,
and they do fill a gap, right? Because I think because of when they bloom.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a gap. I swear that the rhododendron sales are connected to the Masters. So because the Masters was too early this year, so we couldn't go out and buy rhododendrons because the Masters was like the beginning of April. But when it's the end of the month, you know, because everybody's like, what is, and you have to explain, like, it's not going to be 8 feet tall like it is at the golf course, right, in Augusta, but you know, you can buy them here, you can grow them in your garden, they're just going to be smaller, you know. So and I thought that this year too, I thought, oh no, nobody's like in the garden centers yet. Well, the Masters are going on, so
I love that you mentioned that, Joanne, because that is another way that trends start, you know, what people are exposed to. There you are watching a golf tournament of all things, but you happen to notice how beautiful the landscaping is. And that, you know, just speaks to how our lives are so connected and into different things, and that can influence what we want to plant in our own gardens. And we definitely are looking at that. We grow a lot of rhododendron, a lot of different kinds of rhododendron. One I really love is PJM. We've been growing that for a very long time. It can take the heat as well as cold. It's a pretty versatile rhodie. And it's got this really pretty lavender purple bloom on it. And that's, I think, the color and the tolerance it has for, you know, a wider zones.
Yes.
Make it a very popular rhodie for sure.
Yeah.
That's a classic one up here in Southern Ontario as well. Tried and true in our area for sure.
We grow a lot of it in Connecticut. And one of the things that really separates Monrovia out as a grower is kind of the hand craftsmanship that we take to our plants. So we do, you know, we're doing a lot of pinching back on the roadie to get as many kind of, blooms going before, we're ready to ship it. So that's really, it's hand pinched.
That's great. Yeah, that's a lot of work though.
Yeah, it is, but it's something we pride ourselves on.
I was going to say the show would definitely be worth it, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, as we reach the bottom of the hour, sorry, Katie, I'm going to
go right ahead.
Do our little thank you for joining us, everybody, here on Reality Radio 101. I'm Matthew Dressing here with my co-host and co-author Joanne Shaw, and you are listening to Down the Garden Path. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you, and from our research, and from the wonderful guests that join us here on the show, such as Katie Tamony, I'm going to say
I know.
Tamony, my apologies, Katie, from Monrovia, as we talk all about timeless design trends and must-have plants for 2023. So don't forget, you can spend some more time with us down the garden path. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget YouTube now as well. At Down the Garden Path Podcast is our handle there. You can find us on all of your favorite podcast providers. And while you're there, please hit that subscribe button to be notified of new content. And please don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from all of our listeners, whether you're listening live or on the podcast. You can always write us here at Down the Garden Path Podcast at hotmail.com. So, Katie, we're talking about design trends. I think I cut you off. I don't know if you were going to the next design trend or you were going to jump into more plants.
A little bit of both, actually.
All right.
I was going to talk about another of those, timeless trends that I think is making its way back, and that is kind of the asymmetry, if you will, of ancient Japanese gardens and the real reverence for rocks and water and the fragility of the landscape and the real kind of celebration of that. I think about the Japanese maple, for instance, and how, just beautiful and graceful that plant is in the garden. And that's become such a symbol of a certain style of garden. But your whole garden doesn't have to have this, ancient Japanese aesthetic. But I think it's really about choosing a few key statement plants in the garden and then really showing them off, really drawing attention to them. So again, the Japanese maple is one of them. And we have a very hardy one, Velvet Viking Japanese maple. It's kind of a low spreading kind. It was discovered in Minnesota by a landscape designer, actually, who introduced it to us, and then we started growing it widely. But that's also hardy, to zone 4, which is unusual in a Japanese maple. And that's been a fantastic choice for us to give, gardeners in the upper north region of the U.S. There's some other plants, though, that have wonderful trees and shrubs that have wonderful forms that I think people are really starting to, really think about form and texture a bit more in their garden. So like the weeping blue atlas cedar, which is this dramatic, it can get 15 feet tall and wide, and it has this wonderful sort of waterfall effect in the garden. Really, beautiful. You'd mentioned the Ito peony, that works both in the nostalgia sense, but also peonies, in the sort of ancient Japanese, garden, that being another plant that sometimes you plant this peony, just one even for that, waiting for those special blooms. Ferns, are another good choice in this design aesthetic. And I think I've got,
your background.
I've got a fern that I use in all of my meeting backgrounds. But we're growing a really diverse selection of ferns, that some of which don't even really look like traditional ferns. So I would really also suggest to your listeners, like, if you think ferns, take another look, because there's a lot of new discoveries there. One that I really love is we have this series called the Jurassic series. So they're all sort of like the movie Jurassic. So we have the Stegosaurus holly fern, and it's got these wider sort of leaflets. It looks great in a woodland, obviously shade garden, but it's just really lush and not, it doesn't, at first you're not sure it's a fern. So
Okay.
that's what I mean by take another look at ferns if you think you know them. I'm not just talking about the Boston fern, there's a lot of choices out there, I guess I would say.
There is. And I think the one thing I love about the Japanese aesthetic is that it is about texture, and it is about, so much more, less about the flowers, like, yes, the peonies, lovely, but, it is about the texture, the foliage colors and shapes and like the Japanese maples, even you can get 3 different Japanese maples that all don't necessarily look like, Japanese. Well, they do look like Japanese maples, but they're different, in the sense that the different leaf textures and the different shape of, you've got the waterfall and different things. So yeah, so I just love that. I think that is a great trend. So I'm happy to hear that.
Well, and you really, that's such a great point about foliage being, so important in this style. I think that the more you begin to garden, the more experience you have in gardening, you start to really get interested in foliage. Maybe it starts with flowers and blooms and sort of that's wonderful, eye-popping color. But the longer you spend gardening, the more you really get interested in foliage and all the variety out there.
Yeah, that and that I think also leads people to evergreens, because I have had several people over my years of designing saying no evergreens, they don't want any evergreens, but and I can't have a hard time designing a garden without evergreens, but I think that sale goes because people think of cedars when they think of evergreens, but if you look beyond that, there's so much more interesting evergreens, just like with the ferns and the foliage. It is more about so yeah, I guess you can see I'm getting excited about foliage, but yeah, I mean so it's great. Well, that is one of the joys of being a designer, right? Is that you can introduce and new things and help your clients see outside the box a little bit. So
I think there's always something new to discover, even like I was talking about, even in something that maybe you've disregarded or thought, oh, I would never like that. Look again.
Yeah.
And then in thinking about, I guess, other must-haves for the garden for 2023, this, I think this plant could go in many of these trends, actually. But, I know sometimes people have a love-hate relationship with agapanthus, but we have a new one that is really different because it's very compact. It's called bridal veil agapanthus. And it stays really short, like 12 inches, tall max. And then it's covered with white blooms, which is lovely. And it was actually a mistake that turned out to be a real find. We were working with a breeder on a kind of agapanthus that was kind of a mix of, white and purple blooms and, sort of regular size agapanthus. And there was this one in the mix that was kind of, not supposed to be there. It was a reject, but we fell in love with it. It was gorgeous. So we took a tissue cutting of it and replicated it and created a lot more of these little mini beautiful bridal veil agapanthus. It's just gorgeous. So if you've rejected agapanthus in the past, I would say there's reason to take another look.
Okay, and it's a good pollinator as well.
It is. Yes, agapanthus is a very good pollinator. So it's a way to feed that trend as
That's
well.
Right. That's right.
And it'll stay nice and low, so you can have it at the edge of your bed.
Beautiful.
And then another plant that actually, for many of your listeners, they would grow this probably more as an annual, but it's so striking, is bougainvillea. Burgundy Queen bougainvillea. Now, this is another plant that was discovered at one of our nurseries in Georgia. One of our craftsmen there happened to notice that a sport of the Barbara Karst bougainvillea, which is very popular, sort of bright pinky purple bougainvillea, this sport actually had very different foliage that starts kind of burgundy itself before it turns, green. So the new growth is really kind of burgundy.
Oh.
And the flower bracts are also burgundy. So it kind of matches the foliage. It's really stunning, really eye-catching. So we started growing that in large numbers in the last couple of years now. And it's become a very different kind of bougainvillea for people to consider.
Oh, that's very nice.
Beautiful. And sorry, that one was Burgundy Queen?
Burgundy Queen. Yeah.
Queen. Okay.
Beautiful.
Queen bougainvillea.
Yes. I just got back from a trip to Spain. So,
Lots of bougainvillea there.
I know, that's the thing. It's like you can't even appreciate it here when you see it there as growing like their cedar, like our cedar hedges, they're growing hedges and hedges of it. It's quite something. But it has always been, I did see some white, but for the most part, it is the pink.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's definitely like the rhododendron that you were talking about, the masters. It's one of those plants that when people are traveling, they see it and like, oh, how could I have that? Can I have that in my backyard? Yeah. And you can grow a lot of our bougainvillea in pots. We have a lot of, I think, really great choices. If you want to here's another trend I want to mention, this idea of upscale relaxation in your backyard. When everybody was anchored to home and couldn't travel, we really started getting into spending a lot on our backyards, right? Not just the plants, but upgrading our furniture, adding a fire pit, maybe a pizza oven. And I think that part of that, people want to have this feeling of being on vacation in their backyard, plants that have might have a tropical look like hibiscus, and you can grow that in a container and then, move it indoors if you're in a colder climate. Right. Or even trying some house plants outside, or, the scheffleras, the, a ficus, moving it out on the patio in the summertime to kind of create this languid spa kind of feeling.
Yes.
And I think we still, even though we're all, moving around again and we're traveling again, as we weren't, for a couple of years during the core of the pandemic, I think that people are now still really wanting that feel in their backyards, interested in creating that sort of feel of almost being on, vacation all the time.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people like the challenge of trying to keep something alive, like that whole, like enjoying it all summer. And then I'm going to bring it out and let's see if I can get it next year, Definitely.
I think gardeners in those, tougher conditions. Really, what you said, it just reminds me of a lot of, friends and people I correspond with, that they really do look at it as kind of a quest, can I keep this, this plant going, and for how long? Yeah, definitely. Can I make it? It becomes, and when I look at my like trials, and my sweet potato vines are like not happening, and I have like a big huge thing of coleus, so you try and then it doesn't happen, kind of thing. So that's what's fun about gardening, right? That's right. It's just you're on this constant sort of curiosity,
constant journey.
Yeah. So I have one question for you, and that I've seen coming up a lot in like the Facebook groups and stuff. And that's just, I think, like, I love all the trends, but it's almost like it's almost becoming controversial now because of the whole pollinator movement and the native plant movement.
Yeah.
There's a really, some people that are kind of, hardcore, like, well, then we shouldn't be planting any ornamentals. We should only be planting natives. And I'm certainly not on that. I think we need to have a mix. I think nativars are just as important for pollinators. How, as a grower, like, how are you kind of dealing with that type of, I don't want to say controversy, but just debate, discussions?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. So first, we love natives, and we want to encourage people to plant natives for all the reasons we know.
Yeah.
But I think the number one thing we want to encourage people to think about is planting diversity. Plant a diversity of plants. That is really going to help our system. Don't plant anything invasive. I
Yes.
think that there's a lot of yearning to do the right thing by the environment, by I want to be a good gardener that's part of a bigger world, and I want to take care of the earth. But I also think sometimes people say native when they might mean other things. So it's a little bit, when somebody says they are interested in natives, I always ask, when you say native, what do you mean? Because sometimes they could be talking about, I want to grow something that's really native right around where I live, because I think it will survive better in my garden. It'll be good for the local ecosystem. That's great. I think sometimes people say native when they mean climate appropriate. I want to plant something that's drought tolerant, that can take the heat. Because the other thing about native is when people say native, I always ask, how native do you mean? There's an interest in California natives, but California, for instance, is sprawling, huge state. And what's native in Southern California and San Diego might not actually be better in Northern California than a nativar, a cultivar.
Right.
So it matters when you say native, what you mean.
Yeah.
So I think that should be part of the debate too. We grow 400 North American natives. And we also grow lots of other cultivars, and we also grow plants that, for instance, the fern I was talking about, discovered by Dan Hinckley in China, who brought it here through appropriate means, USDA, and brought the seeds here for us to develop. And some people hear that and they think, oh, no, that's terrible, that would be invasive, confusing a plant that's from somewhere else as meaning invasive. And that's not what invasive means. So I think when we have these conversations, it's just always good to ask people questions, back to, when you say native, what do you mean? What are you wanting to accomplish in your garden? Because the other thing I would say about planting all natives is that can be a really difficult to maintain garden, because natives are gonna, thrive, wildly, get wild. Natives are gonna get a little wild in your garden. So it may take more maintenance to plant an all native garden than you have time for. And then I don't want to see people rip all that out because they're frustrated. So anyway, I would say that we think about diversity, and we really want.
Yeah, that is a good way to answer it, that diversity is important. And I don't think planting non-natives is, certainly invasives is, but I don't think it's a negative to plant non-natives. Like, I think we still need to have beautiful landscapes. And I think that's where people just really need to, realize that we can do both. You can be successful at both.
Exactly.
And also natives, they eventually will take over and they will eventually do well. But like the first year, maybe even the second year, they really don't look like,
Right.
And so I think then that would really set people up to be discouraged. So I think having things that automatically look good, like, peonies and hydrangeas and things, help people be successful too, right?
I think that's true. I think that's why it's important to have a mix.
All right. Looks like we have a couple more questions.
Just as we reach the end of our time, just a few listener questions and comments. Tom wrote in and just wanted to confirm that Monrovia does ship to Canada for other independent garden centers. And
we do.
You can order, etc.
Yes, we do.
And to clarify, and you can do that online. And
yes.
Okay. Perfect.
You have to enter your zip code. Sorry, you have to enter your zip code to see what is available to you, because we have to do the shipping to you via garden centers that we're shipping to, for instance. So if garden centers in your area aren't, getting orders from Monrovia, like they've stopped for the season, then we won't be shipping. So it's dependent on your zip code and timing.
Right. And I must say website's beautiful too.
Oh,
So our listeners can, my plant finder, I mean, it's very
yeah,
user friendly.
it's a great way to filter out. I'm looking for something that is full sun, a great screening plant. You can find something. We grow 4,000 varieties, so it's good to have that search tool there. The other thing that's on our site is what we call the design guides. You can get some of the design inspiration, the trends that I was talking about. You can look under the Be Inspired section of our website, and there's on the top, it says planning guides, and you can click on planning guides and you can see a library of different, downloadable landscape designs that you use, like anywhere from 4 to 8 plants, and you can sub in, maybe a variety that or plant that might grow better where you live, but you get the idea from the planting.
Yeah. No, that is a great tool. And I like that you've kept it manageable, like 10 stunning palettes for spring and summer. I mean, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Seven must-have plant types for a beautiful garden design. Woo. Yeah, this is like time, when you're procrastinating, you're really working on a design, but no, you're really like doing this kind of thing, right? Oh, goodness gracious.
Catherine's also written in, hello, Joanne and Matt. A very interesting radio show tonight. Does Monrovia do webinars for education?
We do, yes. We have a monthly webinar series. The next one is coming up May 10th. We're talking about extending your outdoor living space, and we usually have myself and a plant craftsman from Monrovia, somebody that's an expert more than I am in our plants, and usually a special guest. And we do that on a monthly basis. And if you subscribe to our email, you get an invitation to the webinar. So.
Excellent.
There you go.
Now I have another question too about like growing for so new plants, like let's say for that you want to start growing next year or new developing things. Like how do you see these trends influencing that, or those plants influencing the next trends? I guess it's all kind of tied together, right? You can tell this stuff gets me really excited.
I know, I love it. Well, both things are true. I do think the trends that I talked about, those aren't like, fads, color of the year, or things like that. They'll be around for a while. I see them as kind of macro trends, if you will. And plants, what people were purchasing helped us kind of define those. But I also think that the more that we see people gravitating toward a particular trend, then the more we'll look for plants that can help you achieve that. I think the Garden of Abundance trend and this interest in natives has us very interested. We're watching that and seeing how can we help? How can we help gardeners? What plants can we help bring to them?
Yeah, I think that's such a perfect term for it too, is Garden of Abundance. So I think that's really sums it up. I really do. So that is exciting. Oh, thank you so much, Katie. This has been so great to share this with us and our listeners.
This has been a lot of fun for me. Thank you both for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll have to have you come back again and talk wild and wonderful plants and trends or anything else that excites you as well.
I would love that.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch up with you, I'm sure, in the very near future.
Sounds good. Happy everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
And so, Matt, did you have some ideas for our stepping stones segment?
For our stepping stone segments, you know what? My mind is just racing with plants after Katie's inspiring and talk about all of her plants. Nothing jumps to mind overly. I think maybe just what we were talking about last week. Watch for your garden centers, what things are coming out. We've had that kind of the tease. It's very cool, but a lot of plants are still arriving. So, do some of your research, show up at your local garden center. Don't forget your veggies are going to hit first before, the main peak. So you might be looking at them for your May 2-4 or your last frost date, but we're often going to see a lot of them ahead of time. But if you were listening tonight, I I hope Katie's talk has inspired you to look at your own garden and, start designing, or reach out to someone like me and Joanne, who are landscape designers who are still designing. And um, the season's getting busy very, very quickly. So, if you're looking for some help, reach out. But there's still lots to do and lots of exciting things. Did you have one that jumped to mind specifically?
Well, we kind of talked about it last week, but I do want to mention about the patience again, that the weather has been cool and we've had a lot of rain. And so people are looking for certain plants and they're finding that they're thinking they're never going to get them, that they're asking, oh, do you have this plant in your garden center? Because mine doesn't have it. Well, it's still early, the shipments are coming. So I just want to remind everybody, patience as far as plants coming in, as well as patience with their own garden. I was on the GO train. I was at the Jays game on Sunday. And so passing, a lot of nature, like even if you look out into the woods and stuff, everything's behind, So I think it's not just your garden, look around you, look at the trees budding when you're driving around, and even in natural areas, you can see that things are a little bit behind. So that's your cue that, nothing's wrong with your garden. There's a lot of people posting pictures of like, is my plant dead? I don't see any leaf buds. It's still early. I think we get all so excited and so looking forward to it, especially I think once the calendar goes to May, right? We can put up with a bit of it in April, but once we flip that calendar to May, we just want our garden to be going. And sometimes Mother Nature has her own mind, right? So I just want everybody to patience with their lawns. Everything will green up when it's supposed to. And I kind of think it's nice to actually have a spring for a change. I think the last several years we've gone right from winter coats to tank tops. Like we haven't needed our spring jackets, nothing, So I think let's just embrace it and enjoy. So everybody, it'll be hot and we'll be upset about our dormant lawns and our how much we have to water everything before we know it. So I think in the meantime, everybody enjoy.
I agree. Take your time, enjoy. That was one of the first things I thought of when I flipped my calendar too, is it's May. It's gonna go so quickly. Like, just stop and enjoy and relax and take that extra moment for sure.
That's right.
So take your time, be patient, everything, all good things in good time, I guess.
That's right.
Or something like that.
Yeah. And a reminder, we're on, you're going to mention about YouTube. I'll let you talk. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, as we wrap up the show, don't forget all of our podcast past episodes if you're looking for more inspiration, or on all of your favorite podcast providers. But also don't forget, we're now on YouTube, so you can search at Down the Garden Path Podcast on YouTube and find lots of past shows and listen there. Yeah, perhaps you like YouTube versus podcasts. Maybe that's where you like to take in your information. I was going to use a better word, but anyways, join us on YouTube. Don't forget to tune in next week as well. We have another wonderful guest joining us here. We're going to talk her new book, Kathy Gent's new book, Ground Cover Revolution. So it's all about mixing and using wonderful ground covers in our gardens and how to do that in a beautiful way. So we hope you all join us. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, follow us on your favorite podcast provider, and tune in next week as we are joined by another wonderful guest to talk all about ground covers. Until then, thank you for tuning in live here on Reality Radio 101, and you're listening to Down the Garden Path. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your host, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.